finally arrived, Gran Turismo PSP for the PSP. Seeing the DeLorean make another appearance in a Gran Turismo game made me think of this.
See if you bastards can do 90.
But unfortunately that was just a crafty editing maneuver. It's not really in the game, come on. We've been waiting about 5 years for this. They first announced it at E3 2004 with the release of the PSP at first, but now they actually release it with the 4th edition of the PSP Go, 5 years later. Can't really say I had high expectations for it because you're used to such a huge game with Gran Turismo on your usual console system, but here we're getting it for a mobile system. All I've been talking about is, 800 cars, 30-something tracks, 60-something variations, and they're not lying with that. But the major thing that's missing here is the simulation mode, or Gran Turismo mode, I guess you would call it now. It's an entire Gran Turismo game minus that, except they kept license tests and called them driving challenges. Just another way to get money, I guess. There are no licenses because there are no race requirements whatsoever. It's basically just your arcade mode, single player races. You have your single race, time trial, and drift trial, something we saw in Gran Turismo 5 Prologue, something I don't really enjoy that much, not in any game really. We also have multiplayer races only locally using ad hoc with other people that have PSPs and the game. There is no online support for this. You could also use it to trade and share cars. If you trade them, you'll obviously it'd be like a trade, but if you share them, you'll still have the car, and then the person you shared with will have that car as well. So basically, without a career mode, I guess, for those of you that don't have no idea what I'm talking about, simulation mode or Gran Turismo mode is kind of like a career mode where you have money and you buy your own cars and win races. But without that, it makes you wonder what exactly is the point of this game then. It seems like what I'm going after is trying to collect as many cars as I possibly can, and it basically depends on. Like what I enjoy doing is trying out a bunch of different cars and a bunch of different tracks, trying to get the feel for each of them and try to find a decent driving line for tracks that I'm not as familiar with as ones that I'm more familiar with. And basically that's what I found myself doing in Gran Turismo 5 Prologue too, after I was done with that little career mode they had in there. Which makes you think, does this kind of make you feel like it's a demo? Because there's not that much stuff in there. Besides, 800 cars is a lot, don't get me wrong, and there's a lot of tracks in there too, but there's no structure to the game. You have no idea what you're supposed to be doing. And after you finish Gran Turismo 5 Prologue, that's the same situation. So basically I found myself just driving a bunch of cars, buying a bunch of cars, and then doing what I'm doing right now with Gran Turismo PSP as well. Don't get me wrong, you might think so far that I think this game is crap, but it's probably my favorite PSP game right now, and it's easily the best looking one. You got 800 cars, and every single one is extremely detailed. I'd have to say, model-wise and detail-wise, it's probably somewhere between Gran Turismo 4 and GT5 Prologue. The only thing I don't like about the cars is that for the dealerships where you buy the cars, there's still the day structure, how the game progresses. Like if you race, then once that race is over, then you'll advance a day in time. 2 days, there's a rotation of 4 manufacturers who never have more than 10 cars at one time. So you could kind of think that would be kind of frustrating. Well, it kind of is, because you're used to buying any car you want at any time, but you can't do that anymore. You have to wait for the rotation. Like I'm on day 116, and I've had Lamborghini one time, but you find yourself getting Mazda, Honda, Nissan, and Toyota, at least one of them every day, which is kind of frustrating, because 50% of the cars that show up for Mazda are Miatas. Just some kind of different model for each year. I have no idea why there's so many. Also, even though I like Skylines a little bit more, in Nissan, that's basically 50% are just some variant of the Skyline. Which is kind of frustrating when you don't have that many cars to pick from on a certain day. As far as gameplay goes, you have a choice either to use the D-pad or the analog thumbstick on the PSP. I can't really tell which one is better, basically because I'm used to using the analog thumbstick, since that's basically how it's been since day one with Gran Turismo 1. But obviously the analog thumbstick on the PSP does not compare to any other analog thumbstick on any of the other PlayStation controllers. It's basically, I think it's not sensitive enough. Just the slightest movement will make a large jerky motion, which you did not intend to do. So instead of turning just a little bit, you'll turn a lot, and it's basically just like a D-pad except with an analog thumbstick. There's no real range of motion with that as far as detecting how far you're going a certain direction. When you're using a D-pad, I found watching some replays, the turning looks a little bit smoother, but it takes a longer time for the car to actually turn once you press the which way you want to go, as opposed to the analog thumbstick. So that's kind of a slight downside there. And obviously there's no analog buttons either. It's all digital. I don't really think I use that too much anyway in any of the games that started using that. I think GT4 was the first. So that's not really too big of a deal for me. Also, Gran Turismo is kind of notorious for having weak computer opponents, and this one doesn't really fall out of that pattern. They're not as bad as earlier Gran Turismo games, maybe close, but I think, yeah, Gran Turismo 5 Prologue is obviously the best at that so far. Usually it's not too much of a problem, but in this one, it seems like they follow more closely to a pre-designated line, and if you get in their way, then they'll just kind of ram you out of the way, so you kind of have to watch out for that. But other than that, all the physics are great. There's obviously no damage. It's not that graphically awesome. It's not quite as realistic as Gran Turismo 5, obviously, but it feels, again, somewhere between 5 and 4, minus the, the analog differences, as far as just, like, not controls, but pure driving mechanics and how the cars go. Also, there seems to be a much greater emphasis on slipstreaming in Gran Turismo, more than I've ever noticed before. Especially on the test course, if you're driving a car that kind of has more room top speed wise on its last gear, but there's just like too much wind resistance and you're just stuck at a certain speed even though it's not its real top speed. But as soon as you get behind another car, that changes quickly. You accelerate like horribly fast. I have no idea if that's realistic or not, obviously, but another thing, when I was driving the Ford GT, I think the one from 2005, it, with the wind and whatnot, the resistance, it stopped at like around 205, 210. Then when I started slipstreaming, it went up to like 230, and that was only in like less than 5 seconds. So apparently slipstreaming can definitely affect your race in this version.